A man unearthed an old sword. On its blade, all enemies of the fallen warrior are now your enemies. Elias had not come to the ruins for treasure. He came for quiet. The hills beyond Durn's Crossing had always been a place where time stood still. Overgrown watchtowers, cracked flagstones, and the skeletons of houses devoured by ivy. The wind here carried the scent of old battles and older grudges, though Elias didn't believe in ghosts. Not until the day he found the sword. It was buried under a slab of collapsed masonry, its hilt barely visible through the moss. At first, he thought it was a rusted piece of farm equipment, but as he pulled the slab aside, the earth split to reveal steel, untarnished, gleaming faintly as though it had been waiting for him. The blade was engraved in a language he didn't recognize, but as he brushed the dirt away, the letters shifted and reshaped themselves until they became words he could read. All enemies of the fallen warrior are now your enemies. He frowned, running a thumb along the cold metal. The sword was too perfect, too clean for something that had been underground for who knew how many centuries. It seemed to hum faintly in his hand. A whisper followed. Not from the wind. No, it was inside his skull. Do you take the burden? Elias almost dropped the weapon, but some stubborn curiosity kept him holding it. What burden? He muttered. To finish what was left undone. To stand where I fell. The air around him felt heavier. He glanced at the hills. Shadows moved where no trees stood, flickers of armor and eyes like embers. He told himself it was just his imagination. He should have walked away. He didn't. By the time he returned to Durn's Crossing, the sky had dimmed to an iron gray. Villagers paused as he passed, their gazes drawn to the sword strapped across his back. He hadn't meant to carry it openly, but something about hiding it felt wrong, almost dishonorable. At the inn, old Mara, who had seen more winters than anyone could count, went pale when she saw the weapon. "Where did you find that?" she whispered. "In the hills," Elias replied. "Why?" She leaned closer, her voice trembling. That blade belonged to Keldaran, the last champion of the Hill Wars. When he fell, the old kingdoms crumbled. The enemies who struck him down swore they'd erase his name from history. But some said his sword would find another hand, and his enemies would find a hand, too. Elias tried to laugh it off, but Mara only shook her head. "Boy, if that blade has claimed you, you're already marked." That night, the dream came. He stood on a battlefield drenched in firelight. All around him, warriors clashed, humans, scaled reptilian fighters, hulking creatures in black iron. And at the center of it was a man, his armor shattered, a dozen arrows in his chest, still fighting with the sword Elias now held. The man's voice rang out, not with his mouth, but in Elias's mind. "Finish it." Then the enemy's eyes turned toward Elias. They didn't see the dying champion. They saw him. When he woke, sweat soaked his clothes. The sound of steel still rang in his ears. And outside, in the cold pre-dawn darkness, he heard footsteps. The first attack came before sunrise. A figure stepped into the street, tall, wearing a cloak the color of dried blood. In its hand was an axe curved like a predator's fang. Its face was hidden by a mask carved with fang patterns, but Elias felt the weight of its gaze. "You carry the blade of Keldaran," the stranger said. The voice was not human. It was deep layered, like two beings speaking at once. "Give it to me, and I will kill you quickly." Elias's hand went to the hilt without thinking. "And if I don't?" The figure tilted its head. "Then you will take his place." His fate. And his enemies are many. It moved faster than anything Elias had ever seen. The axe came in a blur, but the sword met it almost on its own, sparks bursting between them. Elias stumbled back, the force of the blow jarring his arms, but the blade fell alive, guiding his hands. With a cry he didn't know was his, he struck. The sword's edge sliced through the axe shaft as though it were paper, then cut across the figure's chest. The stranger staggered, black smoke pouring from the wound, and dissolved into the air. Elias stood shaking, the street empty again. The days that followed were no quieter. Every night, something came. Shapes in the dark, voices at his window, a pair of glowing eyes watching from rooftops. Each one spoke differently, but all had the same demand: surrender the sword. And each time Elias refused, he began to change. His reflexes sharpened. He could read battle tactics from the way an enemy shifted their feet. He could parry arrows without seeing them. And sometimes, when the fight was desperate, he felt the ghost of Calderan himself, his voice urging, "Strike there. Now. Do not falter." But the more enemies he defeated, the more came. They weren't just hunting him now. They were striking at the village. The final battle came without warning. The sky turned the color of a forge at full heat, and the ground trembled. From the hills poured an army, 100 strong, creatures of every shape and weapon, banners marked with the sigils of forgotten realms. Elias stood at the village gate, the sword in his hand. Fear churned in his gut, but behind it burned something else. The memory of Calderan standing against the tide. The villagers gathered behind him. "Go," Elias told them. "Take the children, get to the river." "And you?" Mara asked. "I'll hold them as long as I can." The first wave hit like a storm. The sword became an extension of his body. Slashes, thrusts, arcs of light that cut through armor and bone. Arrows shattered against an invisible shield. His mind burned with Kale's memories. Battles fought long ago, moved perfected over decades. Still, the enemy pressed on. A massive warlord stepped forward, wielding a hammer big enough to crush a horse. His voice was a roar of thunder. "Give me the blade and I will spare this place." Elias spat blood. "Come take it." The duel was brutal. The warlord's strength was inhuman, each strike shaking the earth. But the sword sang in Elias's hands, finding every opening, every weakness. At last, with a cry that split the air, Elias drove the blade into the warlord's chest. The army faltered. Without their leader, they broke, scattering into the hills. When the last enemy fell, Elias stood in the quiet, the sword heavy in his grasp. He knew the fight wasn't over. Kale Theron's enemies were endless, their grudges eternal. But the villagers returned, safe. Mara touched his shoulder. "It seems the sword chose well." Elias looked down at the blade. The words on it glowed faintly. "All enemies of the fallen warrior are now your enemies." He understood now. It wasn't just a curse. It was a promise, and he would keep it.